We continue love-hate with the quarterbacks. Sorry, Macaulay Culkin is not led by Joe Burrow, but it is led by future Hall of Famer, future Super Bowl champion, Jayden Daniels. And why, Matthew? Three of the past 4 quarterbacks to face the Giants have gone off in fantasy.
Including Joe Burrow, Macaulay Culkin. So there you go. We got to mention in there as well. You see it right there. Russell didn't go, but whatever. Actually, Geno, Burrow, Hurts all had big quarterbacks. The most important part of the 3 quarterbacks I just mentioned, Burrow, Smith, and Hurts, they all had 30% or more of their points come from rushing, which is obviously a big part of Jayden Daniels' game. In his last 5 healthy games, Jayden Daniels has had at least 280 yards of total offense. I know it was kind of a field goal fest the last time they faced the Giants, but I think Jayden Daniels is a much more complete quarterback, much more in command of this offense. I think the Giants aren't as good as they were earlier in the season. Their defense is still playing well, but yeah, I mean, name a hotter quarterback in football than Jayden Daniels right now. He's my QB too. And by the way, this is interesting. But I was watching, I was at a bar yesterday, and they had a bar restaurant, and they had ESPN on the TV. And I saw a couple of people, including my friend Mike Tannenbaum. Shout out to Mike. And they were talking about potential. They were doing this, trick or treat segment or whatever, and whatever.
For a brand.
Yeah. And anyway, but like one of the treats that Mike Tannenbaum said basically was that Jayden Daniels is in the MVP conversation. Like he's a favorite for it, one of the favorites for it. And I was just like, that's what I had my future bet.
Right, 16-1.
16-1. That's what we did that.
Off.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Anyway, on Tuesday's futures. My point being, I'm not the only one saying Jayden Daniels is in the mix for MVP. That's the kind of season he's having. He's a legit candidate. I don't know if he's going to win, but he's a legit candidate.
Yeah, I mean, what he's done to that franchise as a whole, how could you argue against it right now?
You can't.
Kirk Cousins next up on our list. Over the past 4 weeks, Dallas is allowing about 23 points per game to quarterbacks. That is a top 5 marker right now. It is exactly 22.8, Matthew. The Cowboys are a mess from front to back on defense.
It's a mystery as to why they've been so bad, but they really have. Over the last month, the Cowboys allow the 4th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Since week 5, they're allowing touchdown passes at the 4th highest rate. So give me some Kirk Cousins this week. Falcons have a top 3 implied team total. It's actually 52 is the over-under. That's the highest game on the slate in week number 9. This game is in Atlanta in the Dome. So, yeah, Kirk, who's throwing it all over the place against a Cowboys defense that just hasn't shown up. I'll find out which meddling kids are responsible for this. But in the meantime, start Kirk Cousins this week. He's a top 6 play for me.
Another mystery has been Patrick Mahomes' fantasy season. He's been on the hate list at times this year, but a turnaround this week, love list. The Todd Bowles secondary is the cure. I mean, over the past 4 weeks, they rank 31st in pass defense.
Yeah, I mean, like you want to talk about like kind of like a crazy, the case of the missing fantasy points. Yeah, it seems super weird to be like, hey, Patrick Mahomes is on the love list because, he's freaking Patrick Mahomes. But on the hand, like, not only can I put him on the love list, I have to justify putting him on the love list.
QB8
because the truth is that he hasn't been a top 20 fantasy quarterback this year. Fantasy-wise, despite the fact that they're undefeated, Patrick Mahomes just hasn't produced a ton of great fantasy games. He's been outside the top 20, but he's getting better. 2 of the last 3 games, he's had at least 38 pass attempts. First 4 weeks of the season, he had only 1 game with over 30 pass attempts. So they're starting to throw a lot more. The addition of DeAndre Hopkins, I think, helps this offense. And, of course, as you mentioned it, facing Tampa Bay is a cure for any passing attack. Over the last 4 weeks, only 1 team allows more passing yards per game than your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've allowed at least 4 touchdown passes in 3 of the past 4 games. So Mahomes should have a big game against Tampa.
Is there any hope for Mahomes drafters that are still holding on that he could become a fringe QB1 down the stretch of this season, Matthew, once Hopkins is full go, or is that kind of a prayer at this point?
He's Patrick Mahomes. Of course,
But it's been
possible.
a while.
It has absolutely been a while. I mean, I think it's been since like middle of last year where he's been like, okay. But he's Patrick Mahomes. Like he's got I would never say, let me put it this way. You'll never catch me on national television, dressed goofy or not, ever saying that something is beyond the ability of Patrick Mahomes. So is there hope for people that have him on his roster that he suddenly becomes the fantasy superstar that he has been for so much of his career? Of course there is. And I do think they're going to get Isaiah Pacheco back soon. They're adding DeAndre Hopkins. Hopefully they get Juju back as well. And so now suddenly this offense starts to look a little bit better. Xavier Worthy is getting better. He's expanding his route tree. As they're getting closer to the end of the season, they're going to start to use Travis Kelce more. So, yes. And by the way, the other thing is Mahomes is starting to run a little bit more. I don't know if you've seen that, but he's actually starting to get you a little more fantasy points with his legs. Scored the rushing touchdown the other week. So, yes. And it starts this week as he's QB8 for me.
Some others receiving votes. We'll go through these one by one. Bo Nix, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr. Bo Nix has got Baltimore, Matthew. That is the biggest pass funnel defense in the entire league.
I mean, it's...
best run defense, worst pass defense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. 7 of the 8 quarterbacks that have faced the Ravens this year have thrown for at least 269 yards. Very quietly, Bo Nix is the 10th best quarterback in fantasy since week 3. In fact, he's had at least 20 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. So, yeah, Bo Nix. By the way, Matthew Stafford, again, healthy Cooper Kupp, healthy Puka Nacua. He's had 13 games since the start of last year with both guys active on the field at the same time. He's averaging 17.4 fantasy points per game. We've already talked about the Seahawks defense that's allowed multiple touchdown passes in 3 of their past 4 games. Stafford's a top 15 play for me. And Derek Carr, again, it's his first game back, and he's on the road, but it's Carolina, who has allowed multiple touchdown passes in every game this year but 1. They're actually giving the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So, Derek Carr, welcome back.
Hate list is headlined for Thursday Night Football. C.J. Stroud, the worst passer rating of Stroud's career, came against the Jets last season. I know that was a different Jets defense, but the other side of it, Matthew, no Nico Collins, no Stephon Diggs, short week, they're on the road. It's a tough draw for the incredibly talented young quarterback C.J. Stroud.
Playing on a short week without Nico Collins, without Stephon Diggs. Zoinks! Zoinks, I say, Connor. Zoinks! There's only been one quarterback that scored 12 points or more against your Jets this season. And those quarterbacks, there's only 2, I should say. Those quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, each had a rushing touchdown. C.J. Stroud doesn't really run, right? Teams that face the Jets this year are averaging the 4th fewest pass attempts, partially because their defense is so good, and partially because they can't stop the run. So again, like Big Joe Mixon Day, he's outside my top 20, C.J. Stroud tonight.
And Tua falls into this bracket as well. He makes the top 20, but barely at QB 17. Buffalo's been good against quarterbacks. And Matthew, when you watch this offense last week as Tua returns, Mike McDaniel wanted the ball out of his hands quick. They didn't take a ton of shots down the field. So it felt like they were being careful with Tua. And we know he's just not going to run anymore.
Certainly not. By the way, it's a tough matchup against the Bills on the road at Buffalo. Top 10 in terms of lowest touchdown rate, yards per pass attempt, and passer rating against to opposing quarterbacks. Just in general, it's a tough matchup for quarterbacks, and it's especially a tough matchup for Tua. He's of the last 5 games that Tua's played against the Bills, he scored under 14 fantasy points in 4 of them. So outside my top 15 for the week. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.